Picture this. A 200-pound mountain lion crouches in the shadows, watching a hiker walk past on a narrow trail. And in that split second, the cat has to make a decision that could mean life or death. Not for the hiker, but for the lion itself. Because here's the twist nobody talks about. Wild animals are terrified of us, and the reasons why will completely change how you see every animal encounter you've ever had. For most of human history, we like to imagine ourselves as fragile creatures wandering through a world of superior predators. No claws, no fangs, no fur thick enough to survive a winter. Slower than a deer, weaker than a bear, and blind in the dark compared to almost every nocturnal hunter on the planet. And on paper, that's true. If you stripped a human down to nothing but bare hands and put them against a wolf, a crocodile, or a grizzly, the human loses almost every single time. But animals don't experience the world on paper. They experience it through millions of years of evolutionary programming, and that programming has taught them something remarkable. Humans are the most dangerous predator that has ever existed on Earth, and their instincts know it, even when their bodies suggest otherwise. Scientists studying predator behavior have found something fascinating. When researchers played recordings of human voices to animals like lions, leopards, and elephants in the wild, comparing the reaction to recordings of actual predator sounds like lion roars or gunshots, the animals fled from human voices faster and more consistently than from any other sound, including their natural predators. A study published by researchers at Western University in Canada found that mammals across the food chain, from tiny badgers to massive elephants, treated the human voice as the single most frightening sound in their environment. More frightening than lions to a buffalo, more frightening than dogs to a leopard. And this tells us something huge. It's not our claws or our muscles that animals fear, it's the memory encoded into their genes across generations that says humans mean death. And that fear has been earned the hard way, through thousands of years of humans hunting, trapping, and eliminating animals across virtually every ecosystem on the planet. Think about it from the animal's perspective for a second. A lion has evolved for millions of years fighting other lions, fending off hyenas, and hunting buffalo. And none of those encounters prepared it for a creature that can kill from 300 yards away without ever getting close. A creature that hunts in coordinated groups using tools, that lays traps, that remembers grudges, that hunts not just for food, but sometimes just because it can. And when a species faces an opponent like that, generation after generation, natural selection does the rest. The animals that survived long enough to reproduce were the ones cautious enough to avoid humans entirely. So over time, fear of humans became baked into the collective behavior of nearly every wild species that has significant contact with us. And it's not really about intelligence recognizing our tools, it's something deeper and more instinctual, almost like an ancestral alarm bell that goes off the moment a human enters the scene. But here's where it gets interesting, because this fear isn't universal, and it's not static either. It shifts depending on experience. And this is where you start to see cracks in the idea that animals automatically respect human dominance. In places where hunting has been banned for decades and animals rarely interact with armed humans, that fear response starts to fade. National parks across Africa have documented lions, elephants, and even leopards becoming increasingly bold around unarmed tourists and vehicles, because those animals have learned through repeated experience that these particular humans don't pose a threat. This is called habituation, and it's a double-edged sword because while it makes for great tourism and incredible wildlife photography, it also means the natural fear response that once protected both animals and humans starts to break down. Rangers in places like Yellowstone have had to actively haze animals like wolves and bears away from human areas, specifically to preserve their fear of people. Because a bear that loses its fear of humans is a bear that starts raiding campsites, and a bear that raids campsites is a bear that eventually gets shot. So, ironically, wildlife management now spends enormous effort trying to keep animals afraid of us, because that fear is what keeps both species alive. Now let's flip the question. Because the real answer to whether animals think humans are weak isn't a simple yes or no, it depends entirely on which human they're looking at and in what context. A black bear that has never seen a gun might absolutely test a hiker, standing its ground, bluff charging, sizing up whether this two-legged creature is worth confronting. Because in the animal's mind, it's not evaluating human technology, it's evaluating the specific body in front of it. And a human standing alone, unarmed, without backup, without the tools that make our species so lethal, actually can look pretty vulnerable to a 400-pound animal with claws and teeth built for exactly this kind of confrontation. This is why predator experts always emphasize behavior in the wild, standing tall, making noise, not running, because those actions communicate something animals instinctively respect: confidence and unpredictability, whereas crouching down, running away, or showing panic can trigger a predatory response, essentially confirming to the animal that yes, this creature is indeed weak and worth pursuing. So, in a strange way, animals are constantly reassessing the situation in real time, and human behavior in the moment matters just as much as the deep evolutionary memory of human danger. There's also the matter of scale and context that changes everything. A killer whale in the open ocean has zero natural predators and shows almost no innate fear of humans. Dolphins have been observed protecting swimmers from sharks rather than avoiding people altogether, and certain island species that evolved with no human contact for thousands of years, like the animals Charles Darwin famously described in the Galapagos, show almost no fear of humans whatsoever, because their evolutionary history never taught them to. Those animals will let you walk right up to them, not because they think we're weak, but because their ancestors never had a reason to learn otherwise. And this proves that the fear response isn't some universal animal instinct baked into every species everywhere. It's a learned adaptation that only exists in populations that have had repeated, often violent, contact with humans over time. So when you put all of this together, the picture that emerges is far more complex and honestly far more fascinating than a simple ranking of who is stronger. Animals don't think of humans the way we think of ourselves. Weak bodies compared to lions, slow compared to cheetahs, fragile compared to grizzly bears. Instead, animals have learned, sometimes through millions of years of ancestral memory, and sometimes through direct personal experience, that humans represent something categorically different from every other threat in their environment: an unpredictable, tool-wielding, group-hunting force that has reshaped ecosystems, wiped out megafauna, and dominated nearly every corner of the planet. And that recognition, whether encoded in instinct or learned through habituation, shapes almost every interaction between wild animals and people, which means the real answer to the question isn't whether animals think we're weak, it's that animals have learned we're the most dangerous thing they will ever encounter. And the moment that fear disappears, in a national park, in a backyard, in a suburb creeping into wilderness, that's the moment things get dangerous for everyone involved. So maybe the real question isn't whether wild animals think humans are weak, but rather, how much longer can we keep proving them right that we're not?